the jobs have been outsourced. The great exports that Liverpool used to send across the world are not manufactured in the northwest of England anymore, and it just feels like we've made it impossible.
The opportunities were limited by the economy, and because jobs were outsourced to China, everything was imported. Therefore, I got involved in distribution, supplying people to warehouses, which was exploitative work. People be paid minimum wage, doing 80 miles, running around in a shift.
As a local councillor, I'm constantly in touch with people who are coming to me saying, I've just been thrown out by the private landlord, this no-fault eviction. Yes. People that have been in private landlord properties for 10, 20 years, some of them, brought up their families there, and then they're suddenly given a notice, you've got to get out. Now, we haven't got housing in Liverpool for them to move to. We've got thousands and thousands of people on the waiting list. The whole thing it's shot. It's completely shot.
The Manna journey is the catalyst for change in our world. It's a consistent source of truth for the next generation and current leaders. Our mission is to change the world by reframing our current governance, by using ancient wisdom to solve modern problems, and by shaping innovative new businesses to have a culture of pursuit of purpose.
This is the Manna Journey with Phillip Ullmann, and we're here in the amazing Artifact Cafe in Liverpool. We've been out and about talking to people about how society can be made better, and also some of the problems being faced by this amazing city. Liverpool, as you know, was a port city, remains a port city, but a lot of the business that it had historically has started to disappear. That's never broken the spirit of the Scousers, but there has been significant poverty and significant societal and social problems as a result. We're joined today by Councillor Jane Corbett, who's done so many things on the City Council that I've lost track of them, but that includes education, well-being, finance, and actually at one point even being the deputy leader. Jane, welcome.
Good one. And I'm not here as Councillor Jane Corbett, I'm here as Jane. Is that all right?
Well, we can call you Jane,
then I can say whatever I want to say, and Philip can go.
Well, Jane, in that case, if you can say anything you want to say, why don't you take us to the start of this? Because obviously there was a lot of problems in Liverpool. I went to school in Liverpool, and I have to say, when I left in 1995, the place was unrecognisable from what it is today. Tell us a little bit about some of the problems Liverpool's faced.
Okay, well, can I start from when I first came to Liverpool?
You can.
My mum was quite hardcore. My dad was a vicar in London, and my mum was quite hardcore, as in she liked to push us and say, come on, don't be dependent on us. You need to get out there and do something useful with your time. So I was 17 and she gave me a list of play schemes across the country to go and help out on. And I saw Liverpool on the list, and I thought, well, I'll go to Liverpool, sounds romantic. must be the Irish in me, good Irish blood in me. So as a 17-year-old, I got the train from, we were living in Norwich then, got the train from Norwich to Liverpool, got off the bus and said to a kid, where's Shrewsbury House? And she said, just standing right by, it's called the Shrewsbury, it was a youth club. Mm-hmm. So I helped out for a couple of weeks, absolutely loved it. So suddenly, I found myself in a community, and for that, and that is one of the themes that will come through, I think, our discussion today. So being in Liverpool then, the first thing that actually helped me understand how politics and community voice was so important was we were living in a tower block on the 14th floor. It was a council block, Corky block. And we had 3,000 a fortnight in the basement, and the smoke would come straight up through, and we were on the 14th and couldn't get out. So the firemen used to literally just lift up the lid and shout through all the flats, if the smoke gets anywhere, stand on the veranda. So I remember saying to Henry, he said, well, just stand on the veranda. So we talked to people afterwards, and a gang of us in the block, all residents, checked all of these self-closing doors for the fire escape stairs that were going up and down the block, to count how many actually self-closed, not one. Wow. Not one. So, and this was a council block. So we then, as a little group, we went down to the housing office and tried to get listened to, and were treated like, what are you doing here? It's got nothing to do with you. Go away, who are you? So that was 1981, that really shook me up, and I thought, whoa, hang on a minute. The system's meant to work, and it clearly doesn't.
Yes.
So I got involved in community campaigns. As a local resident, joined up with a local neighbourhood council called West Everton Community Council, which is run by local people. And then it wasn't until 2002 that I became a councillor for the area, but only because the person who was standing down right at the last minute. So they scrabbled around and found me and said, OK, can you do it? So I've done that since 2002.
Phenomenal. Well, look, Liverpool is starting to change, and one of the things that Philip's very interested in is the way that governments, the way that economics don't seem to work for real people. Well, in your experience, what can be done to change that? Is the system just completely broken and incapable of repair?
Okay, so it's the principles and the foundation stones that it's all built on.
Yeah.
And at the moment, they are... I was going to use a really bad word actually there, Philip, sorry. They're built on something that is not particularly helpful.
Okay. Yeah.
And they need to be much stronger, and principles that everybody says, OK, this works. If we get this right, we then build. It's like building, in biblical terms, it's the cornerstones. You've got to get the cornerstones right. And if you get that, then the whole structure's going to hold.
But one of the basics of Liverpool, of course, that we've discovered when we've gone to a place like Birkenhead, which admittedly is not strictly in Liverpool, but it's in Merseyside. One of the things is, look, the jobs have been outsourced. The great exports that Liverpool used to send across the world are not manufactured in the northwest of England anymore. And it just feels like we've made it impossible because, look, you can say to people all day, it's their fault, they should get on the bike or whatever, it's their fault that they're poor. But fundamentally, if the jobs are not there, if all you can do is work on a 0 hours contract in a factory, you will never better yourself and your city will decline.
So if you look at the numbers of people on universal credit at the moment in Liverpool, 65,500.
Yes.
Of which a third are in work.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sorry, if you're in work, as the Tories say, work is meant to pay or work pays, well, it doesn't.
No.
Or not always. So if you start from a premise of, say for example, you said every single pound of public sector money had to go through a procurement system which made sure that the people that were part of that contract, that were employed through that route, had at least real living wage, not minimum whatever, real living wage. They had decent terms and conditions. They had living hours if possible, which the Living Wage Foundation suggests as well. But also there was in-work training progression.
It's interesting, when you talk about this in-work benefit, I came across exactly the same from the other side, from the business sector, because our clients would design the package of workers to allow for the working tax credit. Therefore, it didn't go to the workers. Yeah. It went straight to the employers. It's crazy.
Exactly,
and the money, it's a subsidy for capital.
Exactly.
Which is a crazy system, because you end up taking responsibility for these wages away from business to the state.
How does it make you feel when you listen to Jane talking like that? Because, of course, your background, there was a big manufacturing firm that your parents owned in Watford. You went and studied engineering at Cambridge, really in the hope that you would be a manufacturer for the rest of your life, but ended up running a business which supplied all this cheap labour and actually then regretted that was the way that your career went.
Well, I was fortunate to be successful, but the opportunities were limited by the economy, and because jobs were outsourced to China, everything was imported. Therefore, I got involved in distribution, supplying people to warehouses, which was exploitative work. People being paid minimum wage, doing 80 miles, running around in a shift, and literally horrible productivity targets which were not achievable, which means that older people couldn't earn enough. It was a horrible system. But what Liverpool has gone through, it's almost in parallel, because of course it used to export, it used to be dependent on manufacturing. Once that happens, they've got to reorganise themselves around the world, and the world is a different world, and therefore they've ended up, I don't know too much about it, but what actually is produced now in Liverpool, what is produced in the United Kingdom. So if you're not producing anything, you don't need the docks, you don't need, and presumably that was the bulk.
So the docks were huge, obviously. But actually, it's changed. So one of my family came up to Liverpool a few years ago and hadn't been for a very long time, and got off at Lime Street and went, wow.
Yes.
Because it had changed, but that had changed physically. So if you looked at all of the, and this is where the regional and devolution comes in, if you have a really good industrial strategy and a really good economic strategy built on fairness but long-term sustainability, for not only the area but also into the country, but also it links up with other countries, and sadly we're out the EU now, and the EU links up with other, suddenly you're starting to get, because we're a global village, you're starting, okay, well, what do we actually need in this world? Well, just transition into, we're in the middle of a climate crisis, which is unravelling very, very quickly. For example, we had COVID, classic example of where actually people work together. Suddenly across the globe, people were pinging across, using all the IT and coming up with magical solutions. And we can do it.
Jane, one of the things that I think is a major concern, one of the things that Philip often rails about is this, that obviously businesses need to make a profit. Profit's not a dirty word. Yeah. The problem's happened that we don't have a connectivity that recognises the full cost of something that you decide. Now that sounds a little bit in the clouds, but let me be practical about it. If what you decide to do is outsource all of your manufacturing jobs from, say, Manchester to China, then that will boost your profits. There's no doubt about it. But the cost then to Manchester and Liverpool and all the rest of these cities is significant. People end up on the dole. People end up, the example I always give is eating bad food, drinking during the day. I mean, if you are unemployed and your whole family's unemployed, that mental health implication is going to be absolutely huge. What can we do to get businesses to understand the need to do this? Sorry, Phil.
What Jane is saying, what you're saying is nobody is looking holistically.
Yeah.
Joining
the dots.
You're saying, nobody's joining the dots. And I couldn't agree with you more that we need an industrial strategy. We're in Ireland, so we can actually start to become much more self-sufficient, work out what do we need. You say importing, we need to look at each area. If we can do it autonomously, we're much better in terms of redesigning the UK, because as soon as you start importing stuff, you're contaminated by the values of wherever you import, and therefore that becomes problematic. But it's interesting. I've been talking about industrial strategy since I came here, because I started to think, 1 minute, Liverpool can't produce everything for itself.
Yeah, exactly.
No one city can.
And nor should it.
Nor should it. So you start to look at the whole, and you devise an industrial strategy which says, okay, this particular area has this skill set, and therefore we're going to produce that there. We're going to produce, and then you work out the way I do it for a business. But you look at it holistically. I am Mr. UK. Yeah. And I've got to work out how the whole system works.
And also you look out from the UK. So if if everybody's looking in, so if so I represent the Everton ward, one little bit of the Everton ward, lived there for over 40 years now. If all we do is look at Everton, then we're missing Liverpool. And if all we do is look at Liverpool, and we need to keep looking out. But the problem with that is that if people are incredibly stressed out, trying to make ends meet and they can't, and it's got worse and worse and worse. So what the destitution figures for 2022, according to Joseph Rowntree, was 3.8 million, including 1 million children in England.
Yes.
In England, that is what.
When you talk about moving outwards and outwards and outwards.
Not moving out, looking out.
But once again, I return to the point that people don't do that. And actually, if you look at it in business terms, like I was saying a second ago, what will happen is a business will say, we are Unilever, as an example, because it's a local example, we're going to make the majority of our stuff abroad and only have a small amount still made on Merseyside. Well, that's probably very profitable and very helpful for Unilever, but there is a cost associated with that, and the brunt is paid. And some of the places that you've seen in Liverpool look phenomenal, but some of the places we've seen are also show real poverty.
So you look at Unilever, they actually worked for several years with Oxfam to see if they could look at their supply chain abroad for what they needed to get from abroad and make it sustainable, and they got up to about 50% of that. Now, obviously, Unilever is enormous and vast, but I think looking at, if we start from the point of what does the world need?
Yes.
What do we need? What's our basic needs? And in Liverpool, I chair, and have done for about 10 years now, a little group called the Poverty Action Group. And we have partners from across the city representing different groups coming in, and we try and work out on a basic needs list, food, very basic, food, fuel, a home that works, that people can afford, clothing, transport costs so you can get for essential, get to school, get to the hospital or whatever it is, digital access. These are very basic things. Yes. Now, we're trying to cover all that. We can't. Now, how on earth have we got to a position? So if you go then back to the financial crash, and yes, the whole system about the finances is dire. Moving forward from there, why on earth did, why on earth was the policy set up as an austerity policy when you looked at what was the impact of that going to be? So one of the things that I've fought for with a lot of people on the council for years is to get any governments, but particularly the government that came up with the austerity policy, to look at the impact, but do it cumulatively. So if you're going to do one thing, how does that impact there? If you look at something like the housing crisis at the moment, as soon as they started to play around with that and freeze everything, suddenly everything went wrong.
Yes.
In terms of the wages and depressing wages and not having real living wage in there as a minimum and doing in-work training progression and seeing where you need all of that starts to go wrong. So this is why I love Blueprint. So I'm on the Blueprint Advisory Board, right? So I'm going to read you this a little bit out.
And just to be clear, who Blueprints are, so we know.
So Blueprint for Better Business. So they're a group of people that got together and said, look, actually, business can be a real force for good.
Yes.
So they came up with some 5 big principles, and I just love it because anything on one page for me in colours in nice big print is magical, and people love it. I give this out like I'm giving out sweets or something.
But do people eat them?
They act on them. They act on them. So 5 principles of a purpose-driven business. Okay, just listen to this, and it makes you smile. Makes you smile. So what is a purpose-driven business? It's one that has a purpose which delivers long-term sustainable performance. Yeah, operates true to a purpose that serves society. Nice one.
Yeah.
Respects the dignity of people. Good one. And come to profit bit, and so generates a fair return for responsible investors.
Yeah.
Now, if you just look at that bit and then welcomes public scrutiny and blah, 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 the other ones are all about they all integrate, plus the whole green agenda.
Jane, can I stop you there for a second? Because
Just imagine if everybody signed up to that.
Let me respond to that. Look,
Go on.
I agree.
I think that's trusteeship, isn't it?
No. Not quite. Not quite trusteeship. It's the fair return bit that's fundamentally a problem. I'm a businessman, that's what I do.
Yeah.
So I spend my life doing. And I know that the conflict in decision making, if you're purpose driven or you're shareholder driven, that's what that doesn't reflect. Yeah. I completely agree, we should be focused on purpose, but you can't have 2 objectives in life because it's too difficult. And you say,
So what are you saying?
The purpose is to look after people, look after our planet. And the excess that you make, the shareholder doesn't need fundamentally return because it's
a fair return. You're saying that
no, I don't need it
for nothing.
No.
Well, you might not, but if people are putting their money into
well, 1 minute. Well, all the same. You talked about equality. Once you've got enough money to put food on the table, to look after your family, to drive a car, you don't need any more. I'll be straight with you.
But we're living in the real world.
So am I.
Are you?
I am. I am.
Okay.
No, what I'm saying to you is that this is an important point, yeah? The narrative needs to change, and this is the point that you're not recognising. You're saying...
I'm trying to live in the real world.
I know.
So if you come across someone, if Andre is a lot younger and he's just been left a whole load of inherited wealth and he needs to do something with it, yes, he can give it away, or he could actually invest it in really good, positive businesses that are needed in society across the world and get a fair return, which might be 2%, 1%, who knows. And some of it might be like the shared interest one, where it just goes around in a circle and you say, well, shouldn't just use it again and use it again and take your hands off.
The difference with me, James, I've been there. I've been in a business that makes money.
So you're saying we shouldn't have any... you're saying there shouldn't be investors?
What you're missing is this, and I am a realist. Fortunately, I'm the person who's actually made money in the real world and fortunately has a load of investments in the real world. But we're not driven by return. We're driven by purpose. So that's
what that said.
No, we're talking about a fair return for capital. And I'm saying to you is the concept of capital is problematic.
Okay.
And what I'm saying to you is we need return in order to do more good work.
Yeah.
And therefore, you're assuming...
you're saying
I'm not a realist in the real... I have had money and I've no interest in it, basically because it doesn't actually change the world by itself, but if it's used for the right purpose. So yes, once you've got a certain amount you to look after your family, you don't need any more.
Yeah.
And therefore, what I think generally people are more interested in is relationships.
Okay. No, I completely agree that relationships, and if everybody said in the world, listen, all we need to do is aim to get enough money or enough goods so that we can actually look after our family.
Yeah,
but we're not. We're not there.
I agree with you.
We're not there. We're not in heaven.
But no, I agree with you. But the problem, the bit that you're missing is if you continue to allow that vice, I've been there,
Yeah.
then when you're making decisions, there's no basis for making, because the family will say, been there, I want more money, I want more property, I want more to spend more on the family. And then you're looking at purpose and you say, well, I need to look after more people, I need to pay them more because they're not putting food on the table. You end up with a conflict in the real
Yeah.
life. You don't know how to make choices.
Yeah. So if you go down the public sector route, okay,
Yeah.
which doesn't need a return on the investment, okay. So if you look at the public sector money, if, for example, a new government, which hopefully we'll get very soon, a new government comes in and says all public sector funding, all the public sector money has to go down a purpose-driven only route. Now that would suddenly, because then the more investment that you put into the public sector to drive what's needed actually could really make a difference.
Okay.
You don't have to go down the return investment route,
What I'm hearing
which
there,
would be great.
What I'm hearing there is actually there are lots of different ways to ensure that business is not exploitative, but at the moment we've not got there. One of the things that Jane did raise, though, Philip, that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about was the financial crisis in 2008 and the housing situation. Because I know that you've got incredibly strong views on the way that housing has caused poverty in this country, specifically the way mortgages have gone up and up and up and up. It's really staggering now that people are buying the same houses perhaps they would have bought 30 years ago, but now everyone in the family has to go out to work in order to pay for it, and it's become really just a financial asset.
Absolutely. So if we look at property prices,
Yeah.
so let's say, I mean, it's crazy how they've grown. Now people look upon that as a returning investment.
Yeah.
It's garbage.
I know, yeah.
All it is the banks lending more
Yeah.
money, which means it's inflation.
Yeah.
And it's damaging and it's destroying people's lives. And then you end up with husband and wife both having to work, having double the mortgage, having a property that might be worth more, but the bank actually owns it because of the level of the mortgage.
And you need the house. The fact it's worth more means
and
nothing.
therefore the kids and the family are losing out because husband and wife are now
Yeah.
strapped for cash. They're having to work longer hours, and the kids. I was talking to Rachel yesterday at Rydal Gym, and that's what came across.
But in 2008, you felt that was the opportunity to really hit the banks for what you felt was significant wrongdoing.
And that's interesting. That's very different. I mean, I think Jane and I will be completely aligned in terms of objectives, both being people of faith. We want to look after people, we want to look after the planet. But
we don't want to look after them. We are stewards in a world that we believe.
We couldn't agree more. We are
Yeah.
trustees. We're talking
We're
about the same
trustees,
concept.
yeah.
But I look at a different plane in the sense that I don't believe that we can do it with the current system. Most
No,
people,
absolutely.
and therefore,
Absolutely we can't.
what I've been doing is thinking from a zero base.
Yeah, start
and if you
again.
start with this, start again. And I think basically the level of debts are crazy.
Yeah.
And in the last 18 months to 2 years, interest rates have risen from 1.25% to 5.25%, which means the model that we fundamentally have, whereby people borrow money in order to buy houses, and what's happened over recent years is that banks are lending more money, and therefore they lend bigger proportions of income. They have interest-only mortgages, which means you lend even more because you're not having to actually repay any capital. And husband and wife's incomes are added together. When I started, it was 4 times the income of one. No, it's completely moved away from that. Now, what that has done has inflated property prices to the extent where young people can't get on the ladder, and they can't. And I think what's very important, Jane, is that it's financialised the home.
Yeah, absolutely.
What used to be a house where you bring up a family and you are part of a community has become a financial asset.
Yeah.
And that's the way we're all almost programmed to see. But I think that is a very dangerous approach because to me, I know from the Bible that when they moved into the land of Israel, they didn't actually buy any houses. They moved into empty houses. So the concept of a home being an asset for the family, I think is very important. Don't know what you say to that, Jane.
So I would agree completely. There you go. We agree. Because we're talking about homes, and we're talking about homes that then make up a community. And you say, that great thing about it takes a village to raise a child. You're building communities, and if it's just driven by money, or if it's driven by money, it doesn't work. And there's a public health guy who said lack of power and control plus unpredictability equals chronic stress and anxiety. So if you put the housing market into that, and notice we say housing market, like it's some sort of market, So if we put making sure that everybody has a home and a secure home into that, then that takes down that chronic stress that everybody's living with. And I'm as a local councillor, I'm constantly in touch with people who are coming to me saying, I've just been thrown out by the private landlord, this no-fault eviction. People that have been in private landlord properties for 10, 20 years, some of them, brought up their families there, and then they're suddenly given a notice, you've got to get out. Now, we haven't got housing in Liverpool for them to move to. We've got thousands and thousands of people on the waiting list. The whole thing is shot. It's completely shot. So it has to be. So if you go back to Philip's thing about debt, what was interesting was about bringing the faith stuff into it in the Foundation Testament, where it talks about the sabbatical year, the 7th year, and it talks about the Jubilee every 50 years, and that's about debt, so you don't get enslaved. And wasn't that the idea about it?
No, the 7th year was. It goes back to Egypt. If you look at the Egypt story, even before the Israelites became slaves, the Egyptians become slaves, and what they do is Pharaoh actually uses the 7 years of abundance to charge the Egyptians huge monopoly profits, and they end up losing their money. The money runs out, all the silver goes, and then they lose their animals, then they lose their homes, and then they become slaves, which is what you're saying. If you don't get the financial system right, you end up with everybody, and that's where we are now.